Pico, and you're watching Thorin's YouTube.
Right, this is going to be another episode of Daring Minds, my Valorant show here with Gio. And yes, we all know that every episode we do predictions and then not all the predictions work out. That's actually how predictions work, believe it or not. Also, wouldn't it be boring if every time we just got it right? Like, what would the point in even watching the matches be then? You know, it's the way I frame that as though, like, they could just only watch our show and then not even follow the esport. That's just what I do. That's only what I do. You can't do that, fans. You have to keep watching the game. Right, well, for our guest for this episode, we've got a big hitter, we've got a champion. He is a coach, to be fair. It's sicker if it's a champion player, but listen, champion coach is still pretty good. Like, we had Barbar and he hasn't fucking won anything since 1.6 or whatever. But anyway, we've got Chet here, formerly known as I'm a Pet, but please don't call him I'm a Pet. He's dropped that on purpose. I think with good reason. You know, it was one of those names where it's like, look, when you're a 15-year-old gamer, it's fine, but when you're trying to be like a professional and a coach and have respect and stuff, it's not that great a name, is it? It's not that great.
It was pretty rough, man. It's hard to introduce on real life, for sure.
Different kind of website.
Exactly.
Oh, yeah. Wrong impression.
Obviously, as I alluded to, you are the coach of OpTic, and OpTic did win the VCT Reykjavik. So we'll start. Everyone knows Chet. Obviously, you come from CSGO. People from CSGO will know this, but Valorant people won't. I just don't fuck around, mate. I just like to cut straight to the chase. So instead of us dancing around and talking all about winning the tournament, and then eventually maybe tangentially just touching on that topic of that interview you did, why don't we just get the bloody interview part of the way in the first place? Have the jokes, have the interest and maybe nuance we don't know, and then we could go into the tournament. So obviously, after you had a match in the group stage and your team had been upset, you did this interview where, I mean, the infamous line now is that you said that they were just playing cringy comps or whatever, right? And then people took this, and while you probably just went off and had a beer and went to bed and then woke up next day, check Reddit maybe. You didn't know like the whole internet was like burning down at the time, and like this became like, for some reason, for that like 2 days, like every person in the scene, every influencer player had to like comment on it and have their headline and their fucking tweet, right? Can you give us some initial thoughts? Like, what did you mean by these comments? What ballpark were we in here? Like, for example, you can straight up say, were you just salty that you'd lost?
I mean, I was definitely very upset that we lost because I felt like we choked a lot of rounds away. But, okay, so the question at hand was very general. The interviewer gave me, it wasn't even about like any region, I don't think.
Oh, right. So people took it that you were talking about the team that beat you, but you were talking more generally.
I think context wise, since we just lost, people took it as me shit talking them, but It wasn't my intention at all. Honestly, the team we played was very good and probably one of the best teams at the tourney. I was just saying, even for us, we run the most cringiest comps possible in this whole tournament. So I'm like, you know, it's easy for anyone to like put the comps together and just execute it well. And I was just like including us, you know?
I see, right.
So I want to make that very clear. I was not trying to shit talk them, and
you included yourself. You say like we're playing them as well. Like what you were essentially saying is if we play like a weird comp, it might work for us too, right?
Yeah, like
which is sort of accurate. If you look at the tournament, by the way, dude, that takes age pretty well. That and all that detail. Like if you look at all those tournaments from all those Asian countries, like teams that no one expected to be good, they all have their own style, and they all have their own fucking different comps and stuff. Of course.
Yep, exactly. And I was just like, you know, we run like neon on like so many maps. Like we run the most off meta, quote unquote, cringy comps. Yes. So it shouldn't have came off that way, and I didn't mean to attack them. So for that, I apologize if it came off that way. But
okay, whatever.
Otherwise, like I just get so much heat all the time now for it, so I just have to put that out there.
Yeah, of course.
It's like one of those cancelled influencer videos where you got to sit down, no makeup, you got to look, because of course I'm sure you wear a lot of makeup usually, and just look really sad and be like, guys, right, we've got to talk about this. I'm so sorry.
Yeah, he's going to go like, look, I needed to educate myself, but I'm learning now, and I've signed up to a course that's going to explain to me how damaging what I've said has been to people. No, anyway, whatever. The reason I was going to bring it up though is like, as you said, because people didn't report the part where apparently you like sort of included yourself in that, it also just made people clown on you, because then they looked at your team and your team was running the neon all the time, so they were like, wait a minute, he's calling people out for cringy comps. And as you say, like we can actually do this into some real analysis of the tournament now. So Chet, give us some thoughts on that, because when your team did indeed win the tournament, you were the ones, wasn't there some stat like 80% of the time or something you were running the neon versus I think like, was it something like 60% for other teams or something? There was some stat like that on Reddit I saw. Like what was, like, was this already the plan coming into the tournament? Did it just work early on? Like how did this become essentially this theme of OpTic winning the tournament?
So comp-wise, starting this year, we actually didn't change a single thing again, even from champs. We lost to Rise Nation, I remember at the start of the year, and we were running Sky Sova still, even after like 3 patch changes.
Classic.
And after that happened, it was like a wake up call. We were like, holy fuck, like we need to change everything. Like nothing is working. We're being too like stubborn on comps. Like just change everything. And then the team just kind of like gave me some chance to like take the reins on everything. Because normally before I didn't do anything to like change comps. I just kind of went in their system since they're already successful. But then
when did you join, by the way? What was the time of when you joined, just so I could get that?
So I joined after their Berlin run where they made finals.
Right.
Right before the champs land that they did bad at.
Right. Okay. That makes sense then in the context of what you were saying there. Like, you'd only just joined as the coach effectively a few months earlier, right?
Yeah. So we did bad at champs, and then at champs we didn't change anything, and then we did bad at this first online game, and we did bad at that. So then after that we just threw everything out the window. And then I saw Team Liquid was running Neon on a map, and then I asked some other like European players, like Lucker from Alliance, how he thought Neon was, and he honestly said it was shit. So I just didn't like take his warning. I just said like, fuck it, let's just try anything, you know?
That's certainly bold, taking a fucking comp advice from Team Liquid, effectively.
Yeah.
And bloody Alliance. Like, man, at least we know you're not just copying the winners. You're really experimenting out there. Fair play.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I really wanted to just try something that would fit my players more, because we have Victor, who's like super aggro, and he's like a good entry and pretty selfless. So Neon like fits that for him like really well, because you just run in, hold W, and it's one of the duelists in the game that probably doesn't get a lot of kills, because you're literally just running to your death and hoping you get traded based on like how good the execution is. So we just started dry running a shit ton for this tournament and just making sure all the execs were good. And then for the most part, I was just anteing a lot for CT side stuff and just using what practices that we had for setups for the tournament for my antes.
By the way, how much do they let you talk? Did they let you talk as a coach during Valorant games? How does it work?
It's like CS almost. I get to talk in like the freeze time of the first round.
Okay.
I get like the timeout. I got like 2 of them though, which sucks. And then I get the halftime.
CS, yeah, sure.
Yeah. I mean, it's two 1-minute ones instead of like 4 30-second ones. But
right.
I think the 4 30-second ones is better.
It's just because of when you can use them and use them tactically and stuff. Yeah, of course.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, sure. Like I can spread them out throughout the game, whereas like in this one, I'm like very committed. Like I have to like essentially use 1 per half.
Yes. Gio, what did you actually think on this topic, Mike? I wanted to put it to you like this. How much do you think it was being more unique with the comps that helped OpTic win? How much was it just player performance? How do you weigh up the balance on this one?
I mean, I don't think the fact that OpTic had unique compositions is the reason they won. And actually, funnily enough, in the grand finals, Neon wasn't played at all because none of the maps that you play Neon on came up. So to actually say that's why they won would really be misguided. But I think what it felt more like it was, and we're talking from NA playoffs when that Haven game where we first really saw your set plays that you had with Neon come out. I think it's less like, oh, they are the team that brought out the unique composition, therefore they've been doing well. And what it seemed like more to me is kind of what you just mentioned, Chet, which is like you plan something around the strengths of your players. So, Victor being on Neon felt very natural. And you can see other teams who might bring a Neon, and it just doesn't feel natural for the play style of those players and the way that they, perform. Obviously, like, Ye playing a lot of Chamber was a lot earlier, kind of adopted a lot earlier on in the stage than Victor on Neon. But again, that's another example of like, that's not necessarily a crazy composition because most people are doing that and bringing a Chamber, but it still works very well with the way that he plays and is something that has worked very well for OpTic. So, if you like brought a Yoru and it just like wasn't working or like whatever, I'm not someone who's going to be in favor of you like bringing a crazy composition just for the sake of being different and trying to cause a surprise on your opponents. But if it were something that really fit with the playstyle of any of the players and you could make that work, then yeah, you can absolutely get a 1-up on other people. And I think it's interesting that you mentioned like the Sova Sky thing that you were really sticking to, because you go back to that meta and Victor on Sky again was one of kind of the leading Sky players of the era, right? It's like he was very, very good at playing Sky when like the Hawks were super OP and stuff like that. And the reason that you kind of dropped off was not because of because of like the comp itself, but it was because it no longer fit the play style of that player or the strengths of that player because the character changed.
Yeah, I mean, I felt like to put on your thing for Neon, it's like if another team copied it, it's kind of might not fit their players, where like maybe they're better off with a Jet or a Raze. Whereas in our team, like it only works just because it's Vic and that's his play style, and he just likes to run in and he doesn't get tilted that he gets like, maybe like 7 kills in the map or whatever. Whereas maybe other players will, or maybe it just like it's not broken. Neon is not by any means broken. It's just was something different, and the execution just had to be good. If your execution and your team is like not good, and you can't get that down, then it's definitely not worth running.
Obviously, we will go into some of the specifics of VCT, etc., not least because we want to like address the other team's narratives. But I actually had a quick question, Chet, which is from my knowledge of your time in CSGO. So one thing, you might know this narrative, because I was trying to have you on that Strapbook show that I do in CSGO, but you'd already sort of like almost left CSGO by the time, so we'll do it now, basically. But here's the question I had was, I actually thought as a coach, when you were back, especially on the CLG days with your boy FNS, who obviously now is a relevant player again, when you used to be on that team, I always thought a very interesting approach you took as a coach, this is very unique, by the way, other coaches don't do this, was I remember famously, it was at the Star Series LAN where you did this twice. You did it to Gambit on Cobblestone. At the time, by the way, Gambit was like a top 10 team, but they were just amazing at 2 maps, Cobblestone and Overpass. And what Chet did basically in a couple of games that his team got the upset was, he actually planned the night before, we'll just let them pick the map they want and that they're the absolute best on, because in doing so, we guarantee that we know what map we're playing. So instead, I'll just spend all tonight looking at the demos of that map. And essentially, right, that's a very counterintuitive way. Normally in Counter-Strike, by default, you just ban the map that the other team's great on. You try and get to the middle and then you figure out what you're doing. But here's essentially what I thought was genius about this was, because it is their best map, they're definitely going to pick it if you leave it up. And so it essentially meant that all your practice, if you wanted to get like a scrimmy little fucking upset off on someone in a BO1 or something, it's actually a brilliant way to do it, right? So was this something you did more, Chet? Was it a one-off in this sense? Because I think it's quite a unique sort of approach to coaching. It's a way as an underdog to ensure you can have an information advantage.
I think I did something similar like that in EG, and even in this game I did it, where we know, if you know for sure someone's going to pick a map, like I think even the Loud series we played in the final, we knew that they're for sure going to pick Ascent no matter what. We're like, okay, so we can just full on anti this, maybe ban out a weaker map that's not so good for us, and just be fully prepared for that map, because we know it's going to come. We know it's probably going to be like the first map, so if we do our best job and anti everything possible, that if we win that map, then the series is like highly in our favor.
Yes, and psychologically, you sort of put a wound in them if you beat them on the best map.
Yeah, exactly. So like, and it gives you a huge confidence boost if you end up beating them on a map that they're very, very, very comfortable with. And that map, most of the time when I do that, it's not even a map that's good for my team. We just end up picking it, or letting them picking it, because we just know we can beat them, because we just are very, very good at antiing.
That's cool. Yeah, that's quite an interesting approach. I even think, by the way, I wonder what you think of this. Do you think it actually works better in Valorant in that sense, or is it better in CSGO? Because I mean, in Valorant, you got all the different comps as well, right? So in theory, again, like they might just assume you're going to ban some out, right?
Yeah. Okay. So I would say in Valorant, it's easier only if you have VODs of the other team. Where a lot of the time, I don't have VODs of the other team. So deeper in the tournament, it is better. But in the beginning, it's worse. And in CS, it's almost always better no matter what time period of the roster. It just purely depends on the caller, because most of the time the caller, no matter what the lineup is going to play pretty similarly no matter what.
Right.
So it's easier to anti in CS no matter what stage.
By the way, we intentionally lean into bias on this show. So Gio has said many times OpTic is actually her favourite team. We're not just saying that because you're on the show now. We've said, put it this way, we told it to all the other players who were probably, I'm sure, just like, thanks, why are you telling me that? Like, well, it's not me. But so what I want to ask is this, Gio. Let's talk about like, obviously, like I said, Chet actually has a really long history with FNS. FNS was the in-game leader of a team Chet coached in 2016 or something like that. So like, we're going back a fair ways now. So what have you thought of FNS? Because obviously he's the one you were bigging up, Gio. I mean, it's a big deal that he's won a massive tournament. His team technically is number 1 right now in the world.
Yeah, so I mean, I've always enjoyed seeing FNS play. So if we like put aside the IGL thing, just seeing the way that he plays mostly Killjoy, I've always found really interesting and just a lot of fun, because you know he's one of those guys who kind of can come off of Let's say he's like solo holding a site and he has to come and join the different site, and you know that he has the capability of clutching at the end, which is always a lot of fun to see. But FNS clearly, and this has been I think a big conversation over the course of stage 1 this year, has clearly been a very capable IGL. I think that for the most part, OpTic have exhibited a lot of like real coordination that's been quite clear in a lot of the way they play. There's only been a couple of times that I've seen OpTic play and I've been like, okay, something going a bit, tits up here. But I just think because things just seem cohesive, I think, I find it hard sometimes to judge IGLing from the perspective of two things. A, I'm not in the game, and B, because I've never been a pro player, it's only something that I can speculate on what is actually being said within the game. But I think when you can see really good cohesion and you can almost track the intentions of players through the way that they're playing, for me, that's usually what I look for to judge whether or not the IGLing is going well. And that's something that I feel like in stage 1 has been quite clear from OpTic. But yeah, I don't know. I think that he's definitely seemed good. I mean, you'd have to be to get to the point that they've gotten this stage, right, and actually win this Masters. But I really like, and I can really appreciate a team where you can see that the leadership is trying to kind of build the other people on the team. It's not, FNS can clutch, but he's not like chasing for his own glory, I suppose is the best way of putting it in the game. And even if people are just talking about, Yay obviously is a massive conversation piece, or even Victor or whatever, it's like whatever FNS is saying behind the scenes is setting these players up, and the way that he is helping to direct players like Marved or like Crashies is setting those players up to each get, different numbers on the scoreboard, but overall it's a big success, and that's something that I can always appreciate in a team and therefore from an IGL.
Yeah, one thing if people again are coming from CSGO, unlike actually I can even use the example of the old school teammates of FNS from fucking CLG, unlike the Hastes of the world and Cutler, where when they came over, they were obviously just essentially making hay while the sun was out. Well, the game hadn't gotten big, they weren't top CSGO players anymore, there wasn't space in teams for them, so they just came over and this was a way to extend their career. If people don't know, FNS was still a competent player at the end of 1.6, at CSGO rather, and it's just that he wasn't in a top team. Like, he absolutely, if you'd have put him into one of the better NA teams, he would still be a very good IGL. So as an IGL chat, I always assumed, he'll probably have a good mind for the game. But as Gio says, the thing I've been surprised by is he's actually doing it pretty well, like, individually in the game, mate. What do you think of like his individual game FNS and how is he leading the team?
I think leadership-wise, I'll tackle that first. So I'd say he does a good job at. He's not like gonna make people scream. Like, he'll scream himself if anything, but he wants almost always everyone to be just like ice cold, like. Don't like get in, like do a screaming battle. Just be like really like chill and just focus on yourself. Because when we end up focusing on ourselves in this team, we tend to do better than just like focusing on like the screaming mental battle and all that. So he's been very good in that, and his mid rounds have been very good. One thing he likes to stress a lot is if you can call like if no one dies in the first 30 seconds, then we usually win the round, and that's literally his whole objective. If we can get everyone to live for 30 seconds and figure out the setup, then we can win the round. But once he'll be the guy that like is yelling if we just die, like, in the like 10 seconds, 5 seconds, because we've already rehearsed like way too many times that we need to like stay in the back, like use rechargeable utility, stuff like that, and like just and be alive for the mid round. Once the mid round happens, we perform way better. And then individually, I think, well, I can also say just in Valorant, it's kind of easier to just shoot other people. So anyone can have like a pop-off game in this game,
okay,
in my opinion. But also the characters that he plays, he's pretty good at using his utility like very well compared to other players. Like his KO is something he recently picked up pretty quickly. And I would say he does a very good job at like supporting and also using the flashes for himself that I think a lot of other players undervalue. Like giving supportive util and also being able to like be aggro. He's also one of the most aggressive players on our team besides Victor. So we try to put him in less killjoy roles now, so that way he can just run in and try to get like those entries that he wasn't normally getting in the past because he was stuck on like a more passive character. So I think this tournament gave him like that ability to just fight more.
Okay. How does that contrast, Gio, to how like other IGLs play? Because one thing I actually find quite interesting about VALORANT is that, as you've been informing me, like the IGL doesn't have to play one set role or what. He doesn't have to be the worst player. Like in CS:GO, like I've told you on some episode, it's sort of like default that the IGL's just one of the entry pack. He's probably gonna have the least frags. His job's mainly just create space and throw flashbangs, like that's and die so the star player can get all the kills. That's sort of what it is in CS:GO now. Whereas it sounds like in VALORANT, there's so many options as to what you can do.
Yeah, I mean, I think, even just comparing like EU to NA, it's a slightly different story because at least, in the teams that were playing in challenges for stage 1, most of the NA IGLs were in a controller role. You might have a sentinel role, obviously here and there, which is what FNS plays. Whereas over in EU, I feel like you see a lot more diversity, and obviously a big example that we bring up is someone like Yampy on Team Liquid or whatever. So I think that in NA there just seems to be, at least at the moment, a little bit more consistency in that kind of structure. The IGL is probably not going to be the entry player and the guy who's bringing home like all of the frags, and you get obviously a lot of these like star DPS players that get a lot of attention and whatever. And it's not to say that players are not willing, or teams are not willing to have their players sort of like switch roles and stuff, but I feel like there is a little bit more structure in the expectations and the behavior of people based on their roles and where the IGLs are in this region compared to in EU, where like you might have like this team, the initiators, the IGL, this team, the duelists, the IGL, this team, the controllers, the IGL. And so it really comes down to a lot more of like an individual situation, because you think of someone like Nukier on G2, right? It's like Nukier is a very aggressive player, and he's at least these days more often than not going to be the guy who is like up ahead, especially if you're looking at like a Raze-centric map like Bind, for example, where maybe you'd be looking at him more than Mixwell as being the aggressive guy. And it's a very different kind of dynamic. And to be honest, that's one thing I can never get my head around. Is like, I don't know how you can be that person while also trying to lead everyone else. Like, that sounds way too stressful and way too difficult. But yeah, so I think that in EU, you see a lot more of like just on an individual basis, I guess, where it's sort of discretionary. Whereas in NA, it seems like everyone seems to follow a very similar pattern with that in terms of how aggressive / passive / what their role is in the team.
Does that actually make it weird, Chet? Because again, the thing that I'm imagining, if you've got a CS:GO brain, is like, in VALORANT, it must make it different how you like view the round based on like what role the IGL plays. Because if he's alive or dead on the opposite team, it's going to be so different as to how you potentially do the next move, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's so weird in this game because, like, for my team, FNS plays like so many different roles. He's like a lurker sometimes, or an entry, or like he's part of the pack, or sometimes he's like second lurk. Like, I think it just comes down to the system that we have. So once we got pretty comfortable with the system that we made, and we've been running the comps, like certain ones we've been running for a long time, like our Icebox one, where he's just like always part of the pack and he's playing Sage randomly. Like he's just like comfortable calling it now because we've just been doing it for so long. So I think like getting comfortable on these like characters, no matter like what the IGLs roll on, helps the system and helps you like actually make space for your players. And he doesn't necessarily need to frag out. Whereas, well, I feel like in this game, like I said, the mechanical skill isn't as high, where like you don't have like a simple that can just come in this game and pop off like every single round, Whereas in like you kind of have to play off utility a lot more. So once your IGL is like good with utility, then you're pretty much set. And then it also comes down to like experience, which FNS also has, where he knows how to play off of like his teammates very well. So I think the ceiling in this game comes more from how to use your utility well and how to like play off your teammates well, and less about like actually having to shoot your gun. Like shooting your gun is just like the easiest part, is what I'm basically saying.
Right.
Whereas everything else is just way more complicated.
Okay. Oh, one question I had as well, because I wanted to get some thoughts on like actually how FNS is as a leader now. And so the question goes like this. Everyone who knows from CSGO knows that one thing I try to do quite heavily actually is promote IGLs, because I think unfortunately, unless you win, to a casual, it's too hard to know if the IGL's actually good. Like, a lot of them just go by placings. So famously, if you're on the second or third best teams in your region, they just get inevitably underrated and everyone thinks, oh, they all fucking suck or whatever. Like, the joke now is, if it hadn't just been this recent lineup, Chet, they'd all be telling me Stewie 2K is a better fucking IGL than like Daps or something. It's like, not in your fucking lifetime, mate. Like, Daps has forgotten more than Stewie will ever know about being a great IGL. Stewie could call a pug or like a map or be a secondary caller, yeah, but like, to me, Daps and FNS were the two IGLs that got a bit hard done by. Like, obviously in Daps' case, he sort of did help fuck himself over by repeatedly saying, yes, Dinosaur should have my job, which is a bit weird. But this is getting to the point I wanted to say, though, because if people know, FNS's really big break that didn't happen for him in CSGO was briefly, he actually was recruited to Cloud9 when they were the champions. And this was his chance. We thought, you know, like, finally he's got like Tarek again, he's got a bunch of big names, maybe he'll go to the top. But if people don't know, it only lasted a few months. It's not even like, by the way, the results were appalling. They were just sort of like, okay, and he didn't really have much time. I only think he played like 3 lands or something, mate. But here's the one part I was going to get to that's weird, though, is I'll big up these guys all I can, right? But the thing that did crush me a bit is when I actually talked to FNS and Daps, they both seem to have sort of like, they're almost like, they're not like ego IGLs. So like they actually would even tell you like, maybe I'm just not the best though. And it's like, what the hell? Be more confident, like believe in yourself. Like they were sort of like too humble for me, Chet. So I want to know, because same thing with Daps, but he also could have done way more. He could have put his foot down. He could have stayed in some of these teams. What's FNS like in Valorant then? Because that was the reason I was surprised to find he's like in one of the absolute best teams, because it seemed like he himself didn't sort of like have the confidence to believe he was the best IGL or something.
Well, I think on camera, those two are a lot more humble than meets the eye, because I would say they know they're good, and I've talked with them both a lot. I'm sure you probably know that as well, that I'm good friends with them, and
sure,
like they definitely know what they're talking about, and they have a lot of confidence in themselves. I think just probably publicly they don't want to portray themselves that way, but I know like when we talk in my team at least, that when FNS like has an idea and he wants to put his foot down, he's very confident in his calling. So once right. Someone, like let's say the round starts and people are giving like 40 ideas, he'll just be like, shut the fuck up, like everyone just shut up, and then he'll want to do his call because he knows like his call is gonna work, and he's been able to get the respect from his players that they'll just shut up and literally instantly listen to him. Whereas I feel like other IGLs who like aren't the ones that you listed maybe can't replicate that same like energy, and I think Daps and FNS can definitely like do that, and I've already seen them do that. Just probably in the public eye, they just want to seem like much nicer guys. Whereas, you know, for me, I'm the exact opposite.
That's good. I like that tag at the end. It's all done. Yeah. Well played. Okay. Let's start talking about VCT then, shall we, Gio? So let's just start here, right? Obviously, the OpTic story we could do initially. So OpTic does win the event, even though they did lose in the upper bracket final, right? So give me your thoughts on them actually coming back. Like, for example, would you put some of the final... Do you think there was a chalk factor for Loud?
So here's the funny thing. I did a video on my YouTube channel kind of predicting what was going to happen. Okay. And one of the things I said was, so I predicted that OpTic versus Loud were going to be in the upper bracket final, or we already knew they were in the upper bracket final at that point, something like that. And I remember saying, what I have seen so much in esports over the last at least a year or whatever, is whoever wins in the upper bracket final, if those two teams go up against each other in the grand final, it's always the other team who wins. But I thought that OpTic would win the upper bracket final, so I was like, oh, we could see Loud like win this, right?
See, okay.
But it was the opposite of that happened. So like the pattern was what I predicted, but it was the opposite. And OpTic obviously lost the upper bracket final. And then, you know, going into the grand final, I think that one of the... So I don't necessarily want to say that Loud choked, because actually the two last maps went into overtime, right? So it's not like it was a complete stomp. But, you know, Ascent, which was the first map that you played, is a map that Loud have done fairly well on in recent history. Like, it's been one of their better maps.
They never lost last 12.
Right. Ooh, and this was the map that you guys won without being an overtime. And I think that just like a brief overview, because I had to watch back the highlights because I went to like a viewing party for the grand finals, which meant I was more interested in drinking alcohol than I was in actually paying attention to what was happening.
And it would make it hard even if you were paying attention.
Right, you know? Exactly. So, you know, it was a big social thing. So I was like, oh, fuck, I'm going to have to go back and rewatch it. one of the things that like kind of became apparent to me just like on a really like vague surface level is that Loud were constantly falling victim into giving a lot of space away to OpTic for free when you guys were defending. So you would kind of have like defense on like both sides or whatever. Loud would kind of like bunch up in A main or whatever, and then immediately OpTic's like, cool, we can flank that. And it was like, it didn't even happen once. It happened a number of times. And then even when you go over onto the attack, you know, someone like Marv really stood out to me because his way of controlling mid was really powerful. He could just take mid and he got a bunch of kills there and was just very good at taking and holding that space. And so I think that OpTic didn't need to invest as many resources into taking certain spaces on the map, both on attack and defense, as maybe they would have had to against another team. Now, whether that's because like Loud choked compared to their usual play style or whatever it is, the point is how they played wasn't good enough, regardless of it being their best map or not. It wasn't good enough compared to the ease with which that OpTic were finding to do that. And I thought that that was quite notable because I don't know, to me, like, I do sort of truthfully find that a little concerning in a grand final if a team doesn't necessarily, if it doesn't feel like they have to fight for that quite as much. Whereas obviously on Bind and Breeze, it did feel like that you were kind of fighting for the control a little bit more.
What do you think, Chet?
So I would say, okay, this kind of comes down to what I said before the final started. So in my career, I've already been to a lot of finals, and the first final I remember was we were in a Star Ladder in Energy, and we played against Navi. It was the first LAN I joined for them, and we played so passive that we just got absolutely obliterated. And then I remember from that day on, I was like, if I ever make another final, I'm going to make sure my team is aggressive as possible and not let the other team execute on us. So that ended up working out for like all these other tournaments I went to in CS, like Summit and New York and Star Ladder, whatever, and Berlin and all that. So once we got to the final of this event, I was just like, okay, guys, no matter what, let's make sure we're aggressive. Don't give them space. When we know their tells, let's make sure we like flash them. And in that series, especially specifically on Ascent that we're talking about, Victor did a good job with his like KO flashes to like interrupt their execs whenever like the Omen flash was coming, or we knew the Jet was somewhere, or the Sova, whatever. Like he did a good job of just going with Marv in a position and just right clicking a flash and then just peeking together. And even though he didn't get all the kills, Victor, Marv was able to trade him like literally all the time and even come up positive. And that honestly gave us like the reason why we had such a dominant CT side versus them. Also, there was a lot of mind games where, since we did play them before, and they know that we know that they know of our strategy, that we have to like kind of play more aggressively because we're generally a very passive team, and we kind of almost always accept like fate, basically, that they're gonna just exec and we're gonna try to hold the bomb site with like 3 players instead of we're gonna sit like on one of the splits and then try to stop one of the splits. So we played to a different level where we just played like more aggressively, and I think that benefited us a lot against them in that map.
Yeah, that makes sense, because that's also like a general psychological point you'll find, not just in esports, but it's competition in general. It's one of the reasons why, I'll give you the best example. It's why in like the UFC, you'll have someone who's like a fucking revelation, like they're winning all these fights, and then they get the big title fight, and then it's just boring, and they lose like a decision, but like you're like, what the hell? He was like knocking everyone out, and they do nothing, because the problem is, the default scenario when you suddenly know it's for all the marbles is you sort of just, you don't want to look foolish, you don't want to get completely rocked, so you play a bit safer, but in doing so, you're not the same dangerous team you were before. I mean, certainly, if people don't know, his actual team in CSGO proves this, because basically when Astralis was the best team in CS, the number 2 team was actually his rival team. It was the other NA team, it was Team Liquid, and they were better than NRG/EG. But the difference was Team Liquid could never beat Astralis, and EG NRG was beating them most of the time they played them, and this is part of the reason why, because the difference was the EG players didn't give the Astralis players respect. They just played them like another team, and if they had a great game, they could win, whereas the Team Liquid players, you could tell from the start of every game, were sort of like, right, this is Astralis, we've got to be really careful, like, well, like, don't go too aggressive, like, well, you know, and as a result, they didn't give themselves a chance. Like, I think there's a good premise. That's also a shrewd point, because it's not that you straight up choked, it's like maybe you just went into the finals a different beast than another match to me, you know. It doesn't matter even if you played them in the upper bracket final. Like, it's the final's got different pressure on it, you know. I'm bet loud even when the upper bracket final. Remember, you still got a life for the tournament. You're sort of like, wow, we can play a bit free. All the rest of it. There's another factor in the final. You lose, you're out.
Yep, exactly. I feel like us just having that like aggressiveness to us just put us over the edge. Like they did not expect like a half of our plays, and we didn't even do any of them in any VODs or anything.
Oh, this is all fresh stuff, right? Okay.
Yeah, literally all off the cuff. Like we just talked about it beforehand, and we just did it, and it just worked perfectly.
I love it. We knew Flying Ducks, Mighty V shit. Okay, fair enough.
We literally just knew like how everything worked because we played against them last time, and we knew the mistakes we made, and we just like if we just like I said, if we accept fate, let them exec, do their drone, their dart, their omen flash, we're just gonna lose. So we just have to like do something different and just get in their face. And I think a lot of teams, when they get to that point into the final, they don't expect they expect us to play perfect. They expect us to like peek off each other and like you know like do the perfect play. But I feel like generally in my career, once you do this, the scrimmier plays work better deeper in the tournament because players that are good don't expect you to make like what is supposed to be the worst play.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. Gio, what do you actually think this tournament's result means for Loud, though? Like, should Loud actually be a powerhouse team in the future, the next tournament? Like, what do you think of what their performance meant?
I think the whole conversation surrounding smaller regions being a big upset to the bigger regions has been really interesting because, you know, personally, like, I think that competition is more interesting when you have more actual viable competitors, right? From different angles, from different spaces. Like, as fun as the EU versus NA rivalry in whatever sport or competition or anything that you're focusing on, as much as that can be fun, like it is more dull than having like, you know, a 4-way rivalry or a 5-way rivalry when it comes to regions. Sure. And so I think that that's really cool. I think that it definitely is conducive to Brazil being taken a lot more seriously as a region or just being like further on the map. I think a lot of people, especially from like even just a marketing perspective, right, there are going to be a lot more people who are really invested in seeing these teams from South America.
Oh, for sure.
You know, do well in the same way that after champs, a lot more people were on the SEA train. And I think we kind of touched on this in the last episode, or I've made that up, but I think one of the things, oh no, we did, because I said that one of the things that you do have to consider is the fact that because VALORANT being like, you know, a child of COVID and whatever has so far lacked a LAN league and lacked that you find in other esports in like the really major regions, it means that those usual advantages that you might find in the major regions have not necessarily all been there in VALORANT, which has made it a much more level playing field. And it's meant that, you know, there have been certain steps up that those major regions may not have had in VALORANT so far. And I just think it's like, it's fun. It gets kind of boring waiting for like 4 years for another region to become an actual viable competitor. And, you know, not to like move the topic on too much, but with the announcement that came today with the way that these international LAN leagues are going to work, that makes it even more interesting because it's not like NA is going to get a LAN league and South America is going to be left behind because actually Brazil and LATAM are going to be included in that same LAN league as NA. So I think that it's a really cool result because a lot more people are invested in this region. They're going to have a lot more eyes on them. Maybe more investment goes into the region. None of those things are bad things. And then, you know, going forward into when all of these teams are going to be playing together and they are still going to be continuing on that level playing field, like there is going to be more competition for these regions that in most esports kind of just assume they're going to be the best regions, you know?
Sure. What do you think, Chad? You can get either side of this, Chet. You can do like just Loud as a team or Brazil as a region, because obviously people from CSGO will be very interested. Like, is Brazil going to do what they did in CSGO and become as good as NA and sort of make the region stronger potentially if you're all in the same spot?
Well, I do think Loud was actually pretty good because they actually taught us like something about util. About I don't want to specifically say because I want to give it to other teams, but if you watch their VODs, there's a certain way they use their darts and their drones and stuff that is very good, and it gave us like a lot of good stuff. We actually took something from the upper bracket final loss and used it in the final versus them. So we used like some of their own like juice against them, which was nice. But yeah, I think I think generally all the regions are pretty good. It just comes down to who's executing well in the meta, or who can go away from the meta and execute their style well, like how we did. But yeah, I think Brazil is in a good spot as long as the region like develops with Loud, and I think NIP is another team in that region that is very good. As long as those two teams keep like being competitive and showing that they have like a lot of good material and they can help elevate like all the other teams as well, because they have like so many different teams in that region that actually can be good, and we've scrimmed like a few of them since they boot camped in NA. So they're all like in a pretty good spot, I would say.
Yeah, and yes, it was actually the last episode, Gio, where you made that point. It's a pretty good point, actually, because basically the difference, what makes VALORANT unique is, like, in CSGO, the equivalent would be if all these Masters tournaments just were the European or North American land circuit, and it was like the other teams just got to come to the occasional one, like, every 3 months. If instead of 3 of these a year, there was, like, 10, and then they came to, like, every third one, that's more like what it was like for Korean and Chinese teams in CSGO. So they had, like, essentially, they had worse practice at home and a worse understanding of the meta, and then they only got brief exposure to the international sort of circuit, as it were, whereas the international circuit just was Europe and North America. That was, like, everyone's day. Whereas in VALORANT, even if you consider, let's say people think NA is the best region, you're still only playing the NA teams though, and you still don't really know what all the international styles are going to be until you go to the tournament, right? So even the best team in the world actually has a load of surprises wait from at the tournament, right, Chet?
Yep, even the best team, the worst team, people who thought Zeta was bad, Zeta actually made it top 3. It's just anyone can be good. You just have to you have to literally respect everyone, and just, everyone can shoot. You just have to know what their comps are and identify the weaknesses and the strengths, and be able to be adapting to whatever that is in the match. That's like the biggest thing that you have to do, especially against teams with no VODs. You just have to be able to identify and make sure you know how to beat that comp for sure. Because if you have no clue and you go in that match, and like when we played Loud on Bind and they just did this new comp versus us, we instantly had to understand that they're going to win like the util battle on us, and we need to know how to give that and how to like take that away from them as well, like how we can use that info that they have against them. So I think that's one thing that a lot of teams will end up doing a lot better, and that's the reason why all these regions are so like good, is because I think all of them are like know how to understand like all this util battle. They know how to like trade well.
Yeah, as he says there, Gio, like, obviously Zeta is, like, of all the, like, small teams, like, this team was, and people didn't even think they'd get on the group stage. They almost made the final.
Yeah, I was one of those people. I'm trying to, hold on, let me check, because Zeta were in, so, I thought that Fnatic were going to make it out of the groups instead of Zeta, and then obviously the whole shit show with Fnatic went down. So I suppose they did get a slight push from that, but they earned their spot, not only leaving the group stage, but all the way up to the lower bracket finals, right? And yeah, they really did impress. It does make me wonder, like, just to go off a couple of the things that were raised in that discussion that we just had, is like, one of the things that comes up is the fact that the way of playing, the way of using utility, different compositions, etc., can really vary by region. And that's part of the reason why you always have to remain vigilant when you're going into a lot of these international games, and just always be respectful and open-minded to the fact that actually another team might have something on you. When they combine the regions for this 2023 format, it makes me wonder, like, this new quote-unquote Americas region, which will combine North America, Latin America, and Brazil, like, is that going to end up with one meta that's then followed? Because, like, when you then go to, like, the big events, does that mean there's actually going to be less of that potential to be taken by surprise, because the tier 1 regions have combined into bigger regions, and therefore will more likely have one, like, generic meta amongst themselves?
What do you think, Chet?
I think it's tough to say, because sometimes, man, like, we're changing comps like 3 or 4 days before a match. Like, even during the tournament, we even tried experimenting before the playoffs. Maybe there'll be like some teams, or like maybe the Americas will have like something similar. Like, maybe there's going to be like one initiator that for sure everyone is going to be running, or maybe there's going to be like a dominant like Sentinel that always going to be running. Like how NA this tournament was like mainly running Chamber. Mm-hmm. That's like something that NA is known for right now. So maybe that could happen. Maybe just each region has their own special agent. But I don't know about a whole meta comp. I feel like now that this tournament is over, people are just going to be all over the place, and then people are more willing to change like every 4 or 5 days to something new. So I don't think we'll have to worry too much about like metas being the same across regions. Everyone's going to be way more open-minded after this event.
Okay. By the way, that actually reminds me, I forgot to ask one other thing, which is, even though we've already done, this is like, what, episode 8 or 9 or something, we haven't had that many episodes, Chet, but already in the few episodes we've done, we've had like at least 2 guests mention that whenever the European teams scrim OpTic, that you're all trash-talking them in the game. Like, is this accurate? Is this accurate, dude? Because it sounded hilarious. Like, they said like, you were even shit-talking, like, you know, famous people and stuff, like, who the fuck are you? If you win a scrim against you guys, like, who the fuck are these guys? Like, it sounds funnier now you won, I have to say, but come on.
Yeah, I mean, bro, you know, we're NA. We like to talk shit. I mean, I remember who we talked shit to. We talked shit to like FPX. I remember in a scrim and when we were at Champs. We talked shit to like I think Guild. I saw an episode where he said it as well. We talked shit to like all the randoms, like guys, like people that you probably haven't heard of. Like, there's this one guy named Martine. This guy's insane, and we just talk shit to him as well. Like we talk shit out of respect to the other team, you know. Like we don't.
Okay. There's the headline. Okay.
They're just owning us. So like we're just like
right. Okay.
We gotta add some fuel here to see like if we can banter them, you know.
That should be the
that's gonna be the title.
That,
it's all right.
You know the fucking clip that's going around on Twitter at the moment of that like Call of Duty player?
The college one or whatever.
College or whatever. Like that should be his excuse. It's like I was just doing it out of respect, you know.
I think it's just fun though because you get to know like the team well. Like you know, some people banter back as well. It's not like we just shit talk them and they don't say a word. Like they're not robots. Yes. Like I think when we played against Guild, Drake was on the team and he was talking shit as well. So you know, we're just at the end of the day, you get to know them better than just sitting there silently and just trying to be perfect all the time. Like,
there's also that
like
factor.
A camaraderie.
Yeah. There's also I will say that like none of them bothered mentioning that like. Oh, and then I didn't type anything back. Like, yeah, exactly. Enough said. Like, maybe they said it first, but what I want to know is like, show me the rest of that log. Show me the bottom part. Like, what did you say afterwards? Exactly.
It's not even like we're like, you know, we're not trying to be like, we'll still talk with them and like we'll still scrim them.
Okay.
I remember in that podcast he said that we did not want to scrim them. That is not true at all. We definitely are down to scrim them whenever. So that would never happen. We never take it that far. Like it's just all for fun.
Okay.
That's literally all it is.
Fair enough. Okay. I will say, if people don't know it, the players they have in their team, they're not like known as like toxic people in CSGO or whatever. Like, in fact, like people like FNS are pretty chill, like Malmanad, although that might be an act, as Energy told. Maybe he really is actually the little finger of the whole scene. All I'll say is this, Chet. FNS just won a world championship. Where's KNG, eh? Whatever. I don't know why I'm bringing that up now. Whatever. Leave that behind, everyone. Leave that behind in CSGO. We don't need to know about that. Yeah, forget about that. Forget about that. Right, okay, what about this then? Move over a second. I want to ask this then. So what about the Zeta team then, Chet? Because obviously this was a team that was like, this is the one that no one could ever expect this team would be this good at this tournament before, right?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't expect it either. But honestly, I didn't know what to expect. I didn't know who was going to make top 3. I didn't even know we were going to be like get this far as well. So everything to me, every time when we go into a tournament is a full surprise. I even said before we even got to qualify for this event, I was like, I don't even know if we're going to qualify. We might just lose in this group stage. So it was so tough. But Zeta, yeah, like I think they honestly surprised me a lot. Like they're actually structurally like very good. And I know like their analyst puts in like a lot of work and their coaches, they have like a very good structure. And it actually looks like they ante like pretty decently as well. So I have to respect that. Like they actually surprised me with that. Their structure is actually very good. And we did take stuff from them as well. So props to them.
I do. He just admits he steals everything. It's like, yeah, we took that from them. I took this from the other one. We'll take more shit from the rest of you if you.
There's no point in trying to pretend you don't.
No,
everyone takes stuff from everyone.
Right. It's like, no, actually, we come up with all our own original things. People are just going to call you out for bullshit.
I don't know if you remember, Thorin, but in CS, like, my team literally played like Astralis. And that's why, like, when we played Astralis, like it was easier for us. Like we always just like knew what strats they had, and then we would just disrespect them fully because we knew how to exploit the strats. Like that's like how we did so well against them. So sure. I'm always down to steal stuff. Like I feel like I'm like me personally, I just love like taking shit and just doing it better.
What about this then? Because obviously at some point I wanted to ask about the other NA teams who obviously did not do well at this tournament. And one thing I want to ask is, in light of, as you've been describing your own experience with OpTic, like all the things you've changed and taken from other people and switching stuff up last minute for a specific opponent, or just because you don't necessarily know what works, right? The reason this is quite interesting to me is because when people were bigging up the other two NA teams, the Guard and Cloud9, who obviously people thought might end up coming to this tournament, people were saying how great they were, like fundamentally, Chet, about how they had like the metas figured out and they all played like a very structured way. But it sounds like that didn't work out for these guys very much. Do you think in Valorant at the moment, like, is the element of surprise more important? Like, is this just unique to your team that you switch your stuff up constantly?
Like I said before, I think just you don't have to play unique comps to do well, and I think playing meta is fine. You just have to be good at executing whatever comp you have well and make sure it fits your players. Like Guard and C9, like they actually do run some things that are different, but I think for Guard at least, they just didn't have enough experience at LAN yet. And honestly, getting this horrible format where they gave them the playoff bye from an online competition
would have been better if they could have played the group out, right?
Yeah, if they played the group like a normal tournament, like an ESL or whatever, like if the format was normal and regular, then yeah, they would have had a much better chance. But for C9, I think I'm not exactly sure, maybe the pressure got to them or whatever, but they're generally very good in NA and pretty consistent, so maybe next time around they'll make it and they'll actually show us what they have. I have more faith in them that they'll do well, so I think C9 will probably make the next one.
Because here's the thing, Gio, as much as with the death of the Sentinels and all the like rise of all these teams, I know people want us to be like, NA finally strapped off, haha, like all esports. Like, technically, if you look at it, right, they had the champion of this tournament. A lot of the other teams in the mix, by the way, were from the minor regions. And then actually, if you look at those two teams to talk about, sure, they didn't do well enough. Cloud9 didn't make it and the Guard went out early. But like, actually, the potential for NA looks really good. It might be the best region, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's obviously kind of hard to judge, like, best region given everything that happened with Gambit and then FPX and
That's
then
true.
Fnatic.
Yes.
Like, I think that EU are in an unfair situation right now to be judged against for best region. But, I mean, yeah, even coming into Masters Reykjavik, I thought that NA looked pretty strong. Obviously, one of the sad things about, again, being able to judge it is that NA had fewer teams in the competition than EU did. So, you know, if you're judging it by, okay, here's a team who has, you know, been at a number of Valorant lands before. They've made the grand finals in the last Masters event. So a pretty well-experienced team in Valorant, and then also like a very inexperienced team who have very good fundamentals. Like, really, realistically, only one of those teams is one that you're going to expect to particularly do that well in a tournament like this. At this stage, you know, I think that the Guard definitely have a lot of potential, but realistically, the expectation was probably not that they were going to win. So
what is the reason, by the way, why NA only gets 2 slots? How is that worked out?
It was related to
no clue.
It was related to do with like who won what competitions last year.
Okay.
Because
so does it get like reassessed at some point? Do you think in terms of like this year, will they change it up? Okay.
I honestly have no clue because I feel like we never understand the esports side of the Valorant. I feel like it's just all random, like always. Like we literally found out, like, you know, like the online thing that I just said, where Guard got to go to playoffs instantly. Like no one told us any of that. We just found out.
So even when you were playing the match that determined whether you got the top seed, you didn't actually know that's what it was for.
Yeah,
right.
we had no clue. No one told us anything, and we found out like there was a press conference after the match, and the guy asked us the question, like, "Did you know that?" And we were like, "No, I have no idea."
Right. Okay.
So, like, I was just like, everything just feels so like unstructured on the esports side right now.
Yeah, so I know that it was to do with like what regions got what results last year is what set how those spots were divvied out for this event. My assumption, I am sure they have said this before and I just don't remember, but my assumption is that they then redistribute those based on, you know, how this one went. So the fact that NA won this event will probably get NA an extra slot in the next event.
Right.
But obviously,
I hope so.
the next events of the world. I mean, they deserve an extra slot.
I mean, it looks like if you don't get an extra slot, that bloody VCT NA is going to be brutal, mate.
Yeah, pretty much. Like we're not guaranteed to qualify either. So
no,
like,
exactly. Yeah.
Who knows? Literally a month from now, we're just out of it and we're just on break. Like who knows?
Yeah, it's so there's a lot of those like contributing factors that make it hard to say like, oh, is NA the best region or whatever. But I definitely agree with your point about NA having a lot of potential. I felt like even, coming into this event, NA's playstyle, like typical playstyle, looked a lot more like structured than EU's, in my opinion. Like I just preferred the way that NA played, and I would have loved to have seen like Cloud9 or version 1 in this competition as well, just to have seen how it went. But ultimately, we celebrate the fact that there are a lot of smaller regions who can really hold their own in this competition. And with bringing a lot more smaller regions into the competition means that there is less space for the bigger regions to have as many slots as, they might have at other events. So there is the kind of give and take there. But I think you can't have a region win an event and then walk away from that event saying, I don't think they're in the conversation for being the best region right now.
Yes. What do you think, Chet? Is there the best region? Because like I say, if I just was to picture that bracket for VCTNA, there's like 5 teams competing for 2 slots. And that's if I'm not even being generous to some of the other teams. It's going to be a bloodbath.
I mean, yeah, I think our region is pretty good. Like we have like maybe 5 to 6 teams that can like compete like internationally. But I also think you might be better just because the practice we had was honestly miles ahead of NA practice. Okay. But we also don't scrim all the good NA teams when we are in NA because we don't want to show them everything. So that also has something to do with that.
Okay.
Whereas like when we played in this Iceland practice, we played against like Gambit and all these other teams and
that's cool.
that weren't at the event, and we got to experience like so many different things that were actually insane that we normally like haven't seen, So I think if I had to pick a region that was ahead, I would probably pick Europe right now. But I would say it's like not that far ahead of NA. Like it's pretty close. And then I think all the other regions are like pretty decent as well. So honestly, my ideal format would be 16 teams at least, and maybe like give an extra slot to like all the smaller regions plus NA, and just like let it ride out like this instead of the format they currently give, where we're like basically playing like 2-3 lands a year and they're 12 teams for some reason. Like I don't know why they don't want to like make it the most teams possible where it's the most competitive.
Sure. Oh, by the way, one other thing to say is this, like I would ask it this way, right? Being as in NA, like technically your team obviously, let's just make it for the whole world. I'll do it this way. Your team won the tournament. That was the big international tournament. So technically you are the number 1 team in the world, blah, blah, blah. But if we're talking about like just pure ability, how good the team is at the game, obviously you mentioned 2 names that couldn't be there. The Gambit team didn't qualify, M3 or whatever the fuck they call themselves. And then obviously FPX had the situation where they just couldn't attend the event, like for obvious reasons, right?
Yeah.
If every team could attend, is OpTic actually the best team, do you think? Are you the best team in VALORANT?
It's hard to say because when we scrim these teams, some of them own us, and then some of them we do very well against. And scrim results, I think like don't mean too much, so it's hard to like say anything. I think we'll at least be top 3 if they attended. I'll say that much.
It sounds like almost everyone I've talked to is low key like a Gambit fanboy, mate.
Yeah, I mean like they're very good. They're very good. They have like all the right players in the right roles, and they're all pretty flexible. So I have to like give them that respect. They're pretty good.
Fair play. Okay, what about this then? How about if we get just some brief thoughts? Obviously, the day of this being recorded, it won't be released on this day, obviously, was when actually the announcement was about what the circuit's going to be for 2023, basically. Even with that said, though, we don't have all the details. Like, some of it's, like, a bit vague as to what, like, how it'll be implemented or who necessarily, like, for example, we don't know who the teams that'll be the partner teams are and who's invited. And, like, there's a lot of uncertainty and spoiler. Even people in this chat, like, it's uncertain for us. Like, we don't even behind the scenes know all this stuff. So I thought I would just get some brief takes because obviously it is going to massively change the way VALORANT is. So if you had to basically explain explain it like I'm 5 version of what the current circuit is like, and then just how some of the things you've read are going to change.
So the current circuit, basically, a lot of teams can play in open qualifiers, which If they get through them, they get into the closed qualifiers. And if they get through those, they actually get into VCT challenges, which is the regular season that you watch. Currently, there are 2 stages of that per year. Last year, there were 3. And at the end of that, you have playoffs in each of the respective regions. And based on the number of allowed slots into whatever the big LAN event is, that many teams from that region will qualify into the LAN event. You get a winner of that LAN event, and then you go back to the beginning. So, for example, we were just saying before we went live that the NA Open qualifiers start tomorrow?
Oh, okay.
Today, yeah.
Today. And there are a lot of teams that can play. Like, essentially, that is, an open bracket. You can just sign up to do that. The new format is going to have, they've literally drawn it as like a pyramid. So it's got all of these different, and that's not to say it's an MLM, but like it's got all of these different,
okay, I don't know why you throw it in there, but fair enough, okay.
So there's going to be an actual path to pro, and they're going to use an in-game tournament mode for that, which currently doesn't exist. I assume we're going to get more information about that. There is going to be, domestic leagues, which is going to be very similar to the Europe or the regional leagues that we have in Europe right now. I almost said European regional leagues, which is actually a League of Legends product, but very similar. It's basically the same concept.
Yes,
so sure. From what I can gather, they're going to have that in all of the regions as well. Right. So like America's going to get that too. And then the regular season, quote unquote, that is currently domestic is going to be replaced with LAN leagues that actually combine regions. So, for example, North America, South America, Brazil, those are going to be combined into one LAN league. Europe, CIS, Turkey, and MENA, they will be combined into another LAN league. And then I think there were 2 more which cover different parts of Asia and Oceania. And then above that is where you have the big actual international events, which are like, the majors or whatever they refer to them as.
Fair enough.
I think that's what it is.
Because one thing, obviously, Chet, I'd like just fit open thoughts, but one thing I will say that I found amazing when I actually first saw like the Valorant tournament structure, dude, I couldn't believe those open qualifiers. Like, if people don't know other esports games, if in CSGO, I'm not joking, you took the top 10 teams in the world and seeded them all into a massive open qualifier, I don't think even 6 teams would make it to the end. Like, because there's just too many possibilities for like a fluke upset. Like, you play an opponent you can't prepare for, they have the game of their life. It's around, like in CSGO, this would be madness if we had this format. So I'm amazed in Valorant, everyone's sort of like just fucking holding it together. It seems wild if you're a top team.
I mean, we're not holding it together, man. We're not. It's hard, man. Like, when I was in a different team, I'm like, man, this is impossible. We're playing against like these free agent teams or like newer upcomer teams that just have like these insane performances, no VODs, no nothing. Like, we're just absolutely screwed. Literally, if you're getting paid like these massive salaries, you're at a full disadvantage in these opens.
Oh, because they can watch your VODs, but you can't watch theirs. Yeah,
and all your matches get streamed. Your matches get streamed. None of their matches get streamed. So you're just so screwed all the time. They just have every footage, and there's no demos in this game. So it's not like I can go on HLTV, download the demo, and then have my opponent's match. I'm just at a pure disadvantage.
By the way, how is that part different for you? Because obviously in CSGO, famously, the first thing you do is get the demo and bloody go in it and look at every ad. Like in this game, essentially, like it must be harder to pick things out of a VOD, right? Because you're only getting the one angle, like you're having to sort of look at the mini map or something, right?
Yeah, I'm literally like staring at radar, looking at the UI on the side, like looking at the vision cone on the radar. Like I'm trying to like get as much as I can, and it takes
That's so ridiculous.
Longer. Yeah,
I know, it's the way you'll just stare at like the corner of the screen, like the numbers, Mason, the numbers. What do they mean? Like fucking hell.
I assume a demo in CS is like the replays that we're in Overwatch.
It's just a replay you can go because obviously famously Overwatch also didn't have it. Yeah, you can watch every POV, you can free fly around.
That was honestly like one of the biggest things I miss about Overwatch is that I loved that the replay viewer thing where you could do that and have it at any speed and watch whoever you wanted and have free cam. And I was like, this is amazing.
I feel like this is a big oversight. Valorant did not release or like is planning soon to release one. Like I have no news on like if they're releasing one. So I think for an esports game, and they did say it's an esports focused game, there should be a replay system of some sort.
The problem is, though, mate, they effectively did like a sort of a version in League. I'm not joking, like 8 years into the game. And even then, it's not like a proper like CSGO one. Like, it's like you don't have it for every match. So, unfortunately, Riot as a company haven't really shown that much interest in the demo side of things. I sadly suspect it's due to something weird, like they want to sort of have more control over who has footage of the game or something in the pro. I don't really get it myself. It's a bit of a weird one. I just think myself of all the bloody content creators that would make great shit if you made it, you know, like they'd be writing those. Yeah, there'd be loads of shit. Because there's another thing, mate. Like, even though I'm watching Valorant now, like, it's not like anyone's ever just like this would have happened in CSGO. Like, even if someone's not a CS fan, right, you might randomly see, you might follow, say, me on Twitter, and then I might retweet like a simple frag movie. You're going to give it a click. You're going to go, what, I've heard this guy's the best. Like, where's my equivalent for Valorant? Like, why aren't I getting fed this shit, you know? Where's someone, you got to watch this. This guy's fucking a god, you know?
With replays like, too, you can like break down too. You can break down the rounds, like make it easier for the viewer to like digest the round.
Absolutely,
like, You can't.
That became a big thing. If people don't know, by the way, if you are Riot, that's probably the area you're missing out the most. Because in CSGO, the last few years, it became a huge underground subculture of people where, because they actually want to one day be a coach like Chet often, what they do is they show off their game knowledge by just taking a round from a pro player and just breaking that one round down and being like, look, this is the guy through the entry, through the utility, and then look, this entry player took this spin. That became super popular because if you're just like a casual fan, you can get so much out of one of those little videos. Suddenly you make yourself think like, oh, I know how this team plays now. Let's get it. I think in Valorant that would help so much, mate. Like, imagine if someone could have. Imagine if I mean, you could have done it, Gio. If they had the technology, imagine if you could have done that just about like loud before this tournament or something. It'd be incredible, wouldn't it?
Yeah, it would be. I made. Before I kind of like made my departure from Overwatch, I made a couple videos like that in Overwatch, and like, to be honest, they took so long to make because I wanted to like make them pretty and stuff. But it was so sick. Well, no, it's cool because I remember when the map Havana came out in Overwatch, and I like did some video that went over a couple of different games, like the first Overwatch League games that were done in that map. And it was called like, how do the pros play Havana? And like being able to actually show every tiny detail of what happened on each individual like player and what they were doing and why was like, it was amazing. I was so gutted then because obviously then I went to Rainbow Six and Rainbow Six didn't have one of those. And like,
they have the same problem in Rainbow Six as well.
That's rough.
Like, Ubisoft has sort of made one kind of. It's not quite the same. But it's something that a lot of people were asking for. Like, you know, people were being quite vocal about it. So I'd like to believe that Riot are going to bring out one for Valorant, but like, I don't know if it's something that's like quietly being done in the background or they have no plans to do. I have no idea, but I would think it would be sick.
I think it'd be brilliant. Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
What about this then? So another thing I'm interested in as well, Chet, is this, right? I noticed they were very vague about how they described it, because one thing they didn't do, for example, is they didn't use any examples. They didn't say, for example, Chet, like, it'll be a LAN league, like weekly, like the LCS. Like, that would actually be, by the way, the perfect example if it's going to be like LCS.
Did say it was weekly.
Yeah, it said it was weekly, but I mean, they don't really let you know if it's going to be like, is it going to be built like like this is its own product, you know, or is it like, what I'm wondering is this supposed to be more like this is just every day and, you know, we're just finding who's going to the international tournament? Like, I want to know how much focus they'll put on that, basically. Like essentially, will the domestic league, like in NA, will that be a huge thing? Because obviously the NA orgs are enormous, the sponsors are enormous. Like, what's your sense for where Valorant's going, Chet? Because again, another thing I'll tie in is a lot of my mates from CSGO that are in Valorant, the main thing they complain about, mate, now it's not the game. Like, they actually think the game's all right now. Now it's all the bloody circuit. Like, now they all hate the fact that, like, yeah, they're all sat home watching you play if they're one of the other 5 teams that didn't make it, or they, you know, they're waiting for the fucking meta to shift or whatever. Like, all the things we never had in CSGO. So, what's your sense for where Valorant as an esports heading with some of these changes? Maybe do you have a vision for where it's going?
Well, I think this domestic thing, from what I heard, is supposed to be on LAN, so that's a good start. That like will level the play a lot. I think having these regional leagues and the domestic matches is good because I think, correct me if I'm wrong, in League of Legends, they kind of neglected that for a while, and that kind of stunted the growth of the NA scene, where there's not that many good NA players, or there's less opportunity to show yourself that you can be good. So I think it'll generally create a healthy ecosystem in NA, having more matches and more of these leagues and more of these LANs.
By the way, is actually the difference between online and LAN as big a deal in Valorant? Because there's another factor. Like, I couldn't believe when I saw these matches are online to get you to the one big LAN. Like, what? They're not even on LAN for like the last fucking I'm not joking. In CS:GO, you'd have like essentially what is the VCT NA playoffs. You'd just have that as a LAN to figure out who goes to the finals. You know, like I've had it crazy.
Try that with LCQ.
Oh, true. Yes, that's true. There wasn't that didn't quite work out.
Yeah.
Like, what do you think, though, Chet? Is online as much of a different in Valorant?
It's different. It's a lot different because the way it's like CS, like it's easier to hold angles on LAN. Like it's easy. Right. It's just you gotta like it's different noise. Like you gotta like see your opponent. It's just like the energy of the whole thing is just different. Whereas online, like you don't know who the hell's watching what stream, what info they're getting online.
Oh, true.
Like,
yes.
You don't know if people are cheating. Like people very well could just.
Oh, wait a minute! I didn't thought of that, dude. Yeah, that must be obvious. Like it should go without saying. I assume, unfortunately, that motherfuckers are just watch. Like especially if you're in that open qualifier, people just have the stream open, don't they? They're watching what you did 30 seconds ago, right?
Yeah. Even if it was something from 5 minutes ago, like it could still be valuable.
You can still see how you set up the team. Yeah, I mean, they might show that your site set up on CT. They might like know exactly where you fucking hiding a guy. Yeah. Sounds like a nightmare.
Yeah, and it's way harder in this game compared to CS, where like in this game you're not like like in CS:GO you're just 5 CTs, right? You just all look the same. You have the same util. But in this game, if they hear my killjoy is somewhere, and then they know my killjoy's setting up the same way every round, they're gonna know where my turret is, my mollies are, like everything. So it's just way harder, like online. Where I feel like on LAN you get the stakes higher. There's less chance to cheat. Like it's just competitively better. Like,
is it actually possible? Like, I'm asking this because it might be too much mental processing to do. Is it possible if you play the online game to sort of know that though and try and fuck with them? Because I'll give you an example. You know, back in the day when we used to have the death cam that didn't go instantly to black, it like for 4 seconds it would. Well, famously, you know this. Like the best players would actually abuse that. Like they'd purposely for 3 seconds like run the other way and then go the back. You know, so you'd come to your teammate like he's going to the upper or whatever. And you'd be wrong. Can you actually do it in this game? Can you sort of think like, they might know we've done it too many times now. We'll swap it up. Or just have these players if it was normal game.
You're talking about like a non-cheating, non-streaming sense? Like,
yeah, sort of, yeah.
Yeah, probably, yeah. You can probably get away with that. Like, we've probably done it a few times, just like thinking about it by accident. But there's nothing like that. Like, CS was way easier. The death cam fake was like way too easy to fake.
So, it was, true.
In this game, it would take like a bit more effort to like fake your setups and like all that. But people do it. Like, it does happen.
Sure. Right, Gio, by the way, what do you actually think? Like, here's what I wanted to know. This is a genuine question. It's like almost a meta question, right? How do you actually get excited again when the problem is this, right? This is why I've always never understood why people love games that aren't CSGO, because if people don't get it, it's not the game CSGO. It's the circuit I love about CSGO. It's that every 3 weeks I get to watch the best teams play what feels like a world championship. Like, it isn't like we have the majors, sure, but you get the same sort. You get like 80% of those stakes. You get the big match. So what's great is, it's true, the Monday after the Sunday final, obviously I'm like, right, reset all the sort of but I know like I'm only 2 weeks away, like I can just fucking wait. It's like the UFC, there's always one coming up. The problem with Valorant is you've built up all this hype, and then it's like, I'd see you in 3 months. Like, what the fuck? I can't wait that long. Like, how do you get jazzed up again? How do you get into it again?
It's an interesting one actually, because I see this when people are like debating the difference in formats between games, and obviously CS is always brought up as an example because it's so event based. I actually quite like leagues. I'm quite into league formats, and that might be like an anomalous opinion, or I don't know, but
it's a unique one.
I like league formats, but I definitely get more excited when it's like, okay, we know who's qualified for the actual league, like the 8 teams or 10 teams or how many it is who are actually playing in the actual league with the groups, because I think that early on in the qualifiers can be fun for just when, especially if you're really hungry to see how roster moves sort of have turned out, and people are like, oh, I really want to see this player, but I think that for me personally, early in the qualifiers is less exciting unless something kind of crazy happens, or a team has a big upset, or some unknown team starts doing really well. For me, it's always around like when you get to the closed quals, because the interesting thing about Valorant right now anyway is there are more big orgs in Valorant than can actually be in the league itself.
There's way too many, sure.
So I think that's kind of exciting from the perspective of like all of these orgs are fighting to have a space in this esport. makes sense. It might not be like super profitable right now, but it is a very fast growing esport with a lot of promise. And now that they've made this new announcement or whatever, I think that's what a lot of these orgs have been kind of banking on, is that they can get in on that. And so the fact that these orgs are all investing money in pretty good players, and want to kind of hit, it's almost like bumper cars, right? Like they want to hit each other out of the, the ring to make it into this final 10 that are going to play in that league. And then even then, you still only have like a small chance of making it to the international event. I think that's very interesting because, a big example is TSM, right? It's like a lot of people are TSM fans. Thorin, I'm sure you're really on that train. A lot of people are really big TSM fans and they really like following this org and stuff like that. But TSM didn't qualify to make it into VCT challenges this stage. But they've still become a team that people love to watch and are really rooting for. And are they going to take the spot of another big org with, their player changes and stuff like that? So I think for a lot of people, that's where you get a lot of excitement in the qualifier stage. For me personally, I really enjoy like the regular season. But yeah, I mean, it's, obviously because there's one fewer LAN this year than there was last year as well. Or, well, that's not necessarily true because Masters 1 last year was not a LAN. But there's one fewer Masters event this year than there was last year. So I don't know how like that's going to turn out or whatever. But obviously, what I think would be cool in other esports, and this is not unique to VALORANT, and this is... kind of, I suppose, derived from something that is a bit more normal in CS. And I understand why this isn't really the case in other esports, because as a lot of other esports move closer to franchising, this isn't really possible. But is the idea of having LAN events that aren't just like the top 8 teams or the top 16 teams or whatever.
Like a tier 2 LANs, essentially.
Yeah, tier 2 LANs, like, different kinds of...
like a
circuits, stuff like that. And it's like, so it's just, you have your absolutely massive majors, which obviously in CS are ridiculous sized. And then you have other LANs, which, it might not be like the top 3 biggest LAN of the year, but it's still a pretty decent sized LAN and it's still like great competition and like the vibes are good and whatever. And, you get a lot of variety in what talent go and what teams go and whatever. And I think that's a very exciting thing that I personally have never been involved in an esport where that is part of it. And I always think like stuff like that, like the tier 2 LANs and whatever is something that would be cool to pepper in there, even if like the main circuit itself still only has a limited number of these massive LANs.
Yes. Put it this way, if you took the top 8 NA teams that weren't the 2 that qualified to this tournament and just ran a LAN and streamed it, like, that'd get fucking insane viewership, Chet.
Yeah, that would be a good tournament. I kind of agree. I think the CS model is more fun to watch and be a part of, for me personally, because I've been a part of both. Like VCT, it's nice and all, but I think the open qualifier, especially for teams that don't make it to the closed a lot, they're kind of just permanently on break or playing in extremely worse quality tournaments. And then all the other teams that didn't make it also just don't play.
Also seems like they all just, as soon as they don't qualify, just shift the roster, right? Immediately, it's just roster changes the next day.
Yeah, you don't get enough like match time. Like 100 Thieves, like famously, like they made in this last qualifier, they changed their basically 3 players of their lineup right before like the next 3 matches because they didn't want to like lose out completely, even though they still kind of did. Like the thing. It kind of hurts like player careers as well, where like in CS, like you can have like a bad match, a bad LAN, and then you still have one coming around the corner, or you can have a chance to qualify.
Yes.
You have like multiple like tier 1, you have academy like leagues now in CS. You have like so many different ways to show your game.
It's pretty rare someone ever only lasts like 3 months in a team in CSGO. People don't like in VALORANT. Sometimes that's just fucking default for a lot of people.
Yeah, sometimes even like 1 week, and then you're just done.
Yeah,
so
it's true.
It's just completely like fucked, honestly. Where like when I was in TSM last year, and we didn't make it to like any of these events, or like we came close, and we just on break. I'm like, man, what am I supposed to do? And what I did was I just left and I went to join Envy. Like I have nothing better to do.
That's one way to do it.
Yeah, I was like, if I can't join the event, I'm just gonna join the team that made the event because it's just nothing to do. Like I need to like stay active as a coach. I feel like I need to like keep learning this game and like going to the events, and like I feel like everyone else wants the same thing too, whether you're a player, coach, whatever. Like you just want to keep playing. The circuit just right now just needs way more of everything. And I think they said they're going to do that with the third-party events. So hopefully that happens even this year. Just some third-party events, because I think the turnaround this season is like, the next thing is already starting a week after we came back home. So then that's probably going to end in like June, and then Champions is in September or something. So the season ends in September. So from September to end of the year, we basically have almost nothing, or nothing is announced at least.
Yes.
So might as well have some kind of like off-season event, maybe like the league equivalent of like a MSI or something like that we can have, just to fill the season, like
OSI, the off-season
people like
invitational.
maybe like people can have like these off-season roster changes, show their off-season roster at these events, like stuff like that.
Yeah, for people who don't know, in CSGO, there was so many people, because it's an open circuit, competing to put the lands into those weekends. We have to actually mandate from the players' union when the 2 breaks are that on these weeks you're not allowed to have a tournament. Otherwise, the whole calendar is full, and people would put something in those weeks as well. Like every week would have a tournament basically in CSGO. So it's the opposite problem. We're actually oversaturated in CSGO. That's why it's ridiculous. Like every game seems to only go between the 2. Although I'll actually say some games sort of get closer to the middle now. What about this then, Chet? Yeah, go on.
I was gonna say, at least in CS, like you can pick. Like I remember we were like going to every land, we were just picking. Well, actually, one year we just went to everything, which was bad. But well, you can't choose to.
Sure. Oh no, one time, believe it or not, this is actually like somewhat, this just shows how you're damned if you do and damned if you don't. So if you were the top team, right, or like an elite team, top 3 in the world, if you choose not to go to the events, you're going to look silly because you could just win the money, right? The problem is that his team used that logic, and when they were like top 3 in the world, they went to every land, but unfortunately they actually tanked their form because you have to remember as well, CS isn't just all in one place. Like one land would be in like China, then you'd have to go to like fucking Russia, and then you'd have to go, it was brutal, mate. Yeah, it was brutal.
Yeah, we went to like China, Australia, back home to China, and then we went to that epicenter or whatever at the end of that year. I think I saw you there. I was like, man, like I felt so burnt, and we had no prac at any of these events, so we're just going on the fly. It was, that it could hurt you, but we just made bad decisions that year. So
I want to ask. Here's a question I have, right? Because even though we've talked like NA's a deep region, it's got all these top teams. Well, obviously right now a top team is not Sentinels. They finished last place in the playoffs when they were in the VCT. But the thing about their team is not only is there always going to be enormous fan interest because of who they have on the roster, but the names they have on the roster, like they obviously, they make a couple of tweaks, they'll be right back in it, right? So what I wanted to ask is this. Obviously at the moment they're starting to do something where they've transitioned Zombs out. They keep promising they're going to get the coach and all that jazz. I wanted to get your thoughts on this, Chet. What do you think of this? Because there's the thing I found very shocking, especially because it's like some of these people like Shazam are CSGO people. Like, how can a top team like that not have a coach, mate? How's that possible?
I honestly have not a clue why they don't have one. I've heard rumors that they might be getting one, like from established team already, but I have no idea. Like, they should have one. They're like at a huge disadvantage.
Because what you see them as kind of like, they're kind of wasting their potential, right?
Yeah, I mean, they have very good players, so like all they just need is one guy to like help facilitate the practice. Even if they don't want the guy to fully take over, just like at least adjust some comps, like give some defaults here and there, just like literally anything. Because I feel like just taking a little bit of pressure away makes a massive difference for them. But they just, I have no idea why they're not doing it.
Gio, did you see that where they brought in this player Kanpeki from Akru? It's the player they brought in. I don't know if it's a permanent move, but they brought him in for now to replace Zoms, who's technically benched. What do you think of this move? What do you think about like what Sentinels need to do to turn things around? Because obviously this one was a bust, but they've got to get it together for the next one.
The thing that I'm interested in is that Kanpeki and Zoms don't really play the same roles. So, like, is that going to indicate some role switches within the team? Like, I'm not really sure. I mean, it's a funny one because I Yeah, I was sort of on the fence with whether they should make role swaps. I was like, okay, you know, clearly like talented players, but I'm also a really firm believer in like a team of 5 talented players does not a good team make necessarily.
Yes.
So I think having a change is a good thing. The biggest thing in my opinion is still them getting a coach. So obviously I guess, you know, we'll see if that actually happens. But I do want to see if like the Kanpeki thing is going to incite some like role swaps within the team or just force more flexibility. And B, just, I guess, how much of a difference is going to be, because if they just try to absorb him into, like, the Sentinels way of playing, as it always has been, I don't necessarily think it's going to make a huge difference in terms of results. Like, the way they play might, you know, his play style and his performance might cause something slightly different for the team. But I think that with adding new elements to the team is going to have to come with kind of changing, you know, slightly the identity of the way the team operates. And I think that's part of the problem that there was with bringing in Raucus as well, was because Raucus was brought in still within this domain of like, we still want to play that Sentinels way, and we don't really want like tons of input. We don't want tons of control coming from the coach. We very specifically want someone who is an ex-player to be our coach. We want it to fit within this way of thinking and this way of looking at the game. And ultimately, like what that is, like at this point has gone on long enough to prove that that's just not viable anymore. So, you know, I think it's good that they have shown a willingness to make a change. I think like Kanpeki, from what I remember of seeing a crew play, like he was a pretty decent player. It just, for me, it's a mindset thing where like they have to be willing to actually make some changes like in the lobby, just to show that they're kind of willing to grow. And if they're not, then they're going to end up in the same rut.
What do you think, Chet? What do you think of this move?
I'm not too sure. I'm not too familiar with Kanpeki, besides he used to play like Neon on some maps like beforehand, and I don't know like if he's gonna be picking up duelists or not, or if they're gonna, I mean, I'm assuming they're gonna let Tyson Tens do duelists, and maybe Shazam moves like Chamber. So maybe they'll play like more like in the meta, where like maybe they're a little falling behind before. But I don't know how that caters to the new patch. Like I don't know if this was the correct play to make or like whatever. Like there's too much uncertainty. Like I just.
What do you think of Shazam as an IGL, mate? Because obviously I've told the story before. Like if you come for CS:GO, you would never imagine he would be the IGL.
Well, I don't know. Sentinels is not that tactically crazy. I think they just run a good default, so maybe Shazam just helps them run really good defaults, and that's where like the CS shows from him that they can like coordinate map control, and like they have like decent protocols here and there. But I would say like tactically they weren't like super sick. Like there's not like all the set execs that you saw from like, you know, the Asian teams like the APAC and like.
Do you think that's a flaw? Do you think they should play differently?
I mean, I think they should just have more layers to their game, if anything. Like, just have like the fast set pieces or like the mid-round execs that are like very coordinated and rehearsed. Where I feel like a lot of their game is like on the fly, and they do have really good players who can help mid-round and stuff like that. And like they do have that chemistry since they've been in a lineup for majority of them together for a while. So they do have that going for them. But they kind of need to like sit down and just like make sure the things that they run in the mid-round are very well rehearsed. Because that's like such a big advantage when you know like your exec is super sick, and you know like even if there's 4 players there, you're still gonna win the round. It's similar to like Mirage, like when you do like an exec and your mollies are all in the right place, and your flashes are all in the right area, and you know like you're gonna take the bomb site and get the bomb down at least, you know. Where I feel like maybe they're not getting all that down correctly. They're just it's like more on the fly.
Okay. What do you actually think, by the way, Gio? Because as you said, like I agree with you. In most of the esports games I've followed, like making super teams or having like, but everyone's skilled. Like that doesn't even make you vaguely a top team. You know, there's so many other factors to it. And in fact, you go the other way. There's nearly always top teams that have a whole bunch of players where you sort of like individually, I never thought he was that great, but in this team, you know, he does something nuanced, or he sets this guy up, or he's just uniquely good at one specific thing that makes them the best. Like with the players they have right now, they should be somewhere back to being a really good team. Right?
Yeah, I mean, potentially. I mean, I think it would be unfair to say the Sentinels have ever been a bad team. It's almost feels like they have a lot of resources at their disposal, i.e. their players, that they're not necessarily using in the most ideal way. And I think what Chet was just explaining is kind of the description of that. So yeah, I mean, potentially, again, as I say, I wait to see what their coaching situation is going to be before I make a really strong comment on that, because I think that ultimately, if you're just relying on Shazam to do it all, and to have this kind of looser way of IGLing and whatever, then probably like not much is going to be changed. Like, I think they do need some more structure behind the scenes to like build set plays and these ideas that they're going to play off, and not just be that kind of on the fly spontaneous team, because they need some depth. And it's fantastic having mechanically skilled and excellent players, but if you're not providing any depth to the way they're going to play, then ultimately that just won't fly in Valorant. And we've seen that quite a bit from them in this stage just gone, because Tens, as the example, like, he would come away with certain games with like terrible performance and terrible statistics that are not necessarily his fault. It's not because Tens is a bad player, it's because he's not being set up for success. And that, I think, is the indicative of the problem there. Is it doesn't actually matter that they have great players. The problem is the way that they're playing is not conducive to them doing very well.
Yeah, I think they can have like a good season if they just had a coach to push them a little bit to the right direction. Like, when we played them in the match in the regular season, like, they had like some good shit, but like, we would just like out mid-round them basically, because we just had more protocols, and like, they do have like a lot of individual talent, which is why they win a lot of their rounds too. And like, they know how to play off each other, so they have like that going for them. They're always gonna have like good defense, but the attacking is gonna be like kind of hard for them when they run into like a brick wall and they don't have like someone who can time out and like help them figure that all out.
Yes.
That's something that's missing from them. Like, Tyson is always gonna have his big rounds with his knives or like whatever character he's playing. Like, he even shit on us. Like, he killed, like, if there's like one ridiculous clip where he just killed FNS through a smoke falling down without even seeing him, So if you have that plus like the structure, it's pretty hard to stop.
Yeah, like you say, obviously on the T sides, especially where you're going to notice that, because if you're playing off like the strength of your players, well, if the players ever have a bad game, you can't win. Like, the great thing about a system is it can carry sort of players through execution, timing, etc. These can make up for not being the more skilled player in that fight.
When you have insane players and you have structure, eventually when your structure falls apart, your insane players can take advantage of the chaos. Exactly. Whereas right now they're kind of going only through the chaos, is what it feels like to me, at least.
Yeah. Fair enough. Right. One last thing I want to ask on this episode, because again, this is an OpTic fan show for now until I get a favourite team. For now, I'm just going to pretend like I like Gio's team as well. Right. And you're on the episode, so fuck it. It's convenient. Yeah, your team's good, Chet. Well done. Right. The question obviously is, again, another player I know from CSGO, and I would not expect him to be like one of the best players in the whole world, is Ye, because he was just a good player. He had some potential, but he never made it to the top in CSGO. So tell me who this guy is, because it seems like he's not only just a stud, he's like quite a unique player.
Yeah, so when I was in TSM, we always scrim him, and he was on Andbox at the time, and he would always shit on us. Like, he was like the guy, who can I compare him to in CS, actually? I'd say he was like an electronic, maybe, like, just like always explosive rifle rounds, just like running through like a smoke with like his team like always backing him up, and just like getting these weird 3Ks that like the mechanics are just off the roof. Like,
it's hard to force you in.
Yeah, literally. Like, he can just always make space for his team, and the way he thinks about the game is like he has to hit all his shots all the time, and his teammates are like always going to support him, and he's always going to ask for the util. Like, his communication for util has been pretty good as of recent, and he's just like, I think a lot of the things that in CS, I wasn't like a teammate of him in CS. I just only know what I saw. In CS, he would make like a lot of like decisions that may have been questionable, and I think in Valorant he took it a lot more of those like mistakes that he made and worked on them a lot, as you can tell probably, and I think that paid off a lot for him. And also his mechanics just bail him out of so many situations where like a normal player that'd be stuck in like a corner, he can get like 3, and he specializes in agents where like they need to pop off, and he is always pretty much going to deliver like pretty consistently. I think for us, like, he gets us like so many opening picks, even with the op on T side. So it's like not something you get a lot from players that are playing his role. Like, he's definitely min-maxing a lot on his character.
Okay. Would you actually have had him as your MVP, Gio, for the tournament? Who would you pick?
Oh, that's a really good question.
Can be someone from another team if you think they were that good. I mean, there's a lot of games played.
Well, I think, traditionally you kind of got to pick the MVP from the winning team, right?
A lot of people do that, sure.
Yeah, I mean, potentially Ye. I think Ye stands out as the, is flashy the right word? He's kind of like the star player, gets, spoken about a lot. And I think that his performance is, not MVP like. But I mean, I've always been a very big fan of Victor, and I think a lot of the compositions and the strategies that you kind of employ of late do kind of rely on, yes, it relies on everyone to do their job well, but I think that a lot of that is really enabled by the way that Victor plays. And it's like what you brought up at the very beginning, even when he's playing on Neon, it's not necessarily about Victor getting kills, but it's about Victor setting up a situation. I partially want to kind of have him in that conversation as well for potential MVP, because even though he's not necessarily the guy who's like, popping heads in the same way that that Ye is, and he's always got a sniper and he can just teleport straight out and is doing that very, slick, in a slick manner. I think that Victor carries a lot of the opening the opportunities for those sorts of things to happen on his shoulders.
Okay. What do you think about that, Chet? Do you have is there someone you think should have been the MVP? You can, yes. Who would yours be? I mean, you're the coach. You might have a different take.
Is it traditional for a coach to give an MVP to his team?
I think it's fine. I think it's fine, mate. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, I know. I feel like a PR answer would be like everyone's the MVP, But I'd probably say Victor just because a lot of his comms and stuff go unnoticed. Where like individually, like everyone on my team can pop off and like have good rounds, and obviously like Ye and Marv and even Crashies, like they had like pop off moments and stuff. But I'd say Victor. I think he definitely improved a lot, like in his comms and like also just being supportive and aggressive at the same time. So I feel like his game right now is the most complicated right now on the team, just because he has to play a duelist, initiator, and like one time he played Sentinel as well. So like I feel like he just has a lot to think about compared to everyone else, and him being flexible allows us to like do what we need to do. So I'd give it to Victor, I'd say.
This video was kindly supported by Ahmed Hadjou, Matt Pugnatio Rajcula, Travis Goff, Adam Ochs, Animosity, Butt Pounder 420, Hades, Jensen Goh, Joseph Ginsburg, Kovacevicd, Tobias Bernasconi, Thooorin, William Peyton Lacy, Zoomba, Zyrathenia, and a special thanks always goes up to Jerky's Minion. Want to suggest a topic or a guest? Want to ask a question in my monthly AMA? I promise they're coming. Want teasers for my upcoming content? Would you like to be in one of those lengthy donated discussions with me? Well, if any of the above tickles your fancy or the other perks available, put your money where your mouth is and join the Scrolluminati today, where? In the description box below.